Shine. I'm the chairman of the Retirement Reform Task Force, and I want to welcome everybody here tonight. This is a town hall meeting, and we appreciate members of the public being here tonight to share with us their suggestions and ideas about pension reform in Jacksonville as it relates to the police and fire pension funds. I'd like to start by having the task force members identify themselves for the record as being here. We'll start with Sherry.
Sherry McGill, I'm with the Jesse Baldepont Fund.
John, you're next.
John Thompson with Wells Fargo Advisors.
Kelly O'Leary with the HCI Group.
Dr. Bill Rupp from Mayo Clinic.
Greg Anderson, Jacksonville City Council.
Bill Shy, Rogers Towers.
Carl Cannon, retired.
Kirsten Doolittle, I'm a local labor and employment attorney.
John Wilbanks, Baptist Health. Charlie Appleby, Advanced Disposal Services.
Gwen Yates, retired, former city councilwoman.
Bob Miller, Family Support Services.
Right. Thank you all for being here. Before we start with the presentations, Jonathan Trichter, as you know, made a presentation last week to us, and when he got home and started looking behind some of the numbers that had been furnished to him and upon which he relied, he realized that the underlying numbers were not saying the same thing that the aggregated numbers were. So y'all saw the article in the newspaper that dealt with that. Jonathan wanted to come before us and give you a more deliberate explanation of what had happened and then answer any questions y'all may have. So Jonathan, we're glad you're back. We might also say that David Drain is here, Brian Keegan, and Michelle Evermore from Pew. We're glad to have y'all back in town too. Thank you. Great. Jonathan Trichter.
Thanks, Bill. Everybody hear me?
But now, okay, great.
There you
Bill, thanks again. Good evening, everybody.
Can you all hear back there? Well,
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, here we go.
Good.
So at the last task force meeting on October 29th, I presented a number of findings, including some on the PFPF's investment returns. Those findings relied on Jacksonville's police and fire pension fund returns as reported to the task force and labeled market value returns. I discovered those figures were something other than, strictly speaking, investment returns or market returns. And as such, they shouldn't have been compared with market returns of other public funds. So we identified more relevant data for making apples-to-apples comparisons on PFPF's investment performance with other funds, and the new results follow. First, we compared PFPF to the Jacksonville retirement system. As most of you know, that city pension system jointly manages the assets of the general employees pension plan and the corrections officers pension plan. In recent periods for which public data are available, the PFPF's returns have lagged those of JRS. And this is true over the last 10 years, over the last 5 years, over the last 3 years, and also last year. I'll pause on that for a second. The left column is JRS, and the blue column on the right is PFPF. And those time periods are 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, and last year's ascending from right, descending from right to left. Now, after that, we were a little limited in comparing PFPF's performance to other public pensions because it's on a September 30th fiscal year, and most funds are on a June 30th fiscal year. And comparisons are only relevant, of course, if they're over the same time periods. Still, we were able to find a number of similar-sized funds that are on that September 30th fiscal year or simply report their results quarterly. And that allowed us to back into annual periods that ended on September 30th. So bottom line, over the last 10 years for which data are available, that's 2003 to 2012, PFPF underperformed most of the pension funds we looked at. And on this slide, PFPF is second from the right. It's the blue striped block. And the return over that 10-year period for PFPF is 7.16%, which is higher than we originally found. Over the last 5 years for which data are available, that's 2008 to 2012, PFPF performed better relative to these same funds' performance. PFPF is fourth from the right in this slide. And the compounded return over that 5-year period of PFPF is 2.57, and those 5 years are 2008 to 2012. Finally, over the last 3 years for which data are available, that's 2010 to 2012, PFPF performed close to the middle of the pack, and that's PFPF basically in the middle towards the left a little bit. The 3-year returns for the fund between 10 and 12, between 2010 and 2012, were 7.44. And so bottom line is that the PFPF's investment performance is better in more recent years compared to other public funds than what was presented on the 29th. Keep in mind, finally, that these figures include fees and expenses. So the other findings hold, except for one set of pension obligation bond scenarios that I modeled. Recall, one of the POB scenarios was based on market returns of the fund over the past 13 years, and those returns relied on the same mislabeled data and showed compounded annual growth for the PFPF over the past 13 years to be 4.5%. But when you adjust them to match the actual investment returns over the past 13 years, net of fees, the growth rate is actually 5.6% over the past 13 years. And so the previous calculations showed that were the city to issue $1 billion of POBs and were the PFPF's future investment returns to mirror those of the past 13 years, the city would wind up paying $183 million more in debt service than it would achieve in ARC savings. And that amounted to a $164 million net present value loss in that scenario, whereas the adjusted data yielded only a $121 million net present value loss. So a little bit less, right? Now, of course, there are still years left in the life of those bonds. They're not just 13 years. The term of the bonds were 22 years. So we took that 13-year compounded annual growth rate and we projected it over the entire 22 years remaining of the issuance. And our previous results showed that the city would pay $180 million more in debt service than it would save in ARC payments in that scenario, and that amounted to a net present value loss of $158 million. By comparison, the adjusted data using the higher growth rate revealed that the city would suffer only $27 million in net present value losses. Finally, recall that we did the same scenario with $300 million worth of POBs because we didn't think a $1 billion issuance was possible. And assuming the PFPF's historical investment growth of the last 13 years were achieved over the next 13 years, we originally found that $300 million in POBs would cost the city $55 million more in losses than it would in savings, and that was a net present value loss of $49 million, whereas the adjusted data, using that new 5.6% growth rate, found that the NPV loss would be only $36 million by comparison. Finally, if you stretch that out to the full 22-year life of the bonds, then the city would experience a net present value loss of $8 million, and that's compared to the net present value loss of $47 million that we found using the old data. Okay, I think that's everything. So please keep in mind again that these POB scenarios were based on the provisions of the mediated settlement agreement. I know you've got a long agenda, but if there are questions, I'm happy to take a few.
Questions? The conclusion's generally the same, but not as harsh as they were before, and I think y'all will get that. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Let me just, I got 10 email responses to the retirement reform website of people indicating that they would speak or would like me to read their emails, but there are a lot more people here tonight than 10. So in trying to allocate the time, if you're intending to speak and everyone's is invited to, would you just raise your hand so I can get a sense of, so we're really still, okay. Great. So what we're going to do, we're going to invite the mayor to speak first. He has some additional considerations and proposals to put before the committee. And after that, for other speakers, and we know this mayor is always brief, but I'd like to set some ground rules. Number one, we're going to try to have a maximum of 10 minutes for each speaker. That's a little longer than the 3 minutes of the city council, but that'll let you develop your arguments. I've spoken with some of you, who've called me. And if we can do that, we'll have to sort of weigh that as we get into the later parts of the meeting. But we're going to try to let everybody have 10 minutes. I want you to remember, if you're speaking, no personal attacks. The commission is interested in analysis, facts, figures, and suggestions, but we're not interested in personal attacks on particularly any of us, but on each other also. So that's very important. This is a very important issue, but it's also a very emotional issue. It's emotional for the people receiving benefits. It's emotional for taxpayers who are paying for those benefits. And it's emotional for those who have responsibility for seeing that the benefits are protected. So just remember that we really want your analysis and your suggestions, but not your personal comments. If we get closer to the ending time, we may have to cut back on the time, but we'll just have to play that by ear. And if we can, we're going to try to ask, well, I guess this is the way to put it. If you can stick around after you make your presentation, it would probably be better to let everyone make their presentations and then have the committee ask their questions, unless it's just a really important thing that comes up. So that's what we'll try to do. Any questions? In agreement with the ground rules? Right. Great. Well, thank you. Mr. Mayor, we are glad to have you back, and welcome back from London, and a very successful thing there. And we're glad to have you here tonight, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you, Chairman Shai. It's an honor to be here today with so many distinguished group of Jacksonville citizens. As mayor, I want to thank you for your service in Jacksonville Retirement Task Force. You are devoting your time, energy, thoughtfulness to the most important financial issue that the city of Jacksonville faces. It's an important issue to taxpayers. Our annual city contribution to police and fire pension fund has grown from $10 million to over a decade to $148 million this year. We can't sustain this kind of growth. We need to finalize reform if we want to provide quality services to citizens of our community. It's also an important issue to our hardworking police and fire employees. Public safety employees put their lives on the line for us and shouldn't have to wonder how this issue will be resolved. We need to finalize reform so that Sheriff Rutherford and Chief Senefit can retain and recruit without uncertainty about pension complications. That's really an issue. It's important to issue for the financial markets. The Fitch Rating Agency has described the city's current pension liability as a key credit concern and a threat to credit quality. Now, Mr. Chairman, I know you gave me 10 minutes, so I'm going to skip through some of the pages because you have the presentation, but I want to make a couple of points. We need to finalize reform so we can maintain and enhance our city's already strong credit rating. I also want to thank the Pew Charitable Trust for their participation in this task force process. As Chairman Shai indicated in his Sunday Times Union op-ed, Pew chose to participate because they believe that Jacksonville has the political will to achieve retirement reform. From the perspective of the mayor's office, I can assure you that we will be focused and we do have the will. Solving this challenge has been a top priority since I was elected. I greatly appreciate City Council President Gulliford's commitment to the task force process. While I will make some recommendations, some suggestions later in my presentation, please allow me to make a more general one. Through this task force, let's produce more than just recommendations. Let's produce a retirement reform plan that we can implement with City Council approval. That will mean agreement among the different stakeholders so that we can achieve final resolution instead of more litigation. Taxpayers deserve closures, our city employee deserve closures, the financial markets need closure. Let's give it to them through this task force process. By now, most of you fully understand the financial and legal challenges facing our police and fire pension fund. We face unsustainable pension costs in our annual city budget. We have an unprecedented unfunded liability. We face legal and operational hurdles to fixing these challenges. My administration worked hard to address these challenges in the agreement we reached with the Police and Fire Pension Fund. As you know, that agreement would have implemented some of the most significant pension benefit reforms in recent Florida history. Those reforms were more aggressive than either the Florida retirement system or other major Florida cities. Through those reforms, the agreement would have lowered the city of Jacksonville public safety pension costs by $1.2 billion over 30 years. The agreement would have raised the fund status of the Police and Fire Pension Fund from 38% to 71% by the end of the next decade. Last but not least, the agreement would have strengthened the police and fire pension governance through a stringent selection criteria for the next police and fire executive director and the fifth member of the Police and Fire and Pension Fund Board of Trustees. I make these points not to relive the past, Mr. Chairman, but to offer that the agreement as a foundation on which this task force can build on a final solution. So using it as a building block, as a foundation to move forward. We have made great strides toward consensus. The finish line is in our sight, and I'm committed to doing everything in my power to assist you in the final lap. Chairman Shai has correctly identified 3 ways in which this task force can build on foundation laid by the agreement by my administration reached earlier this year. First, we can accelerate the payment of the unfunded liability. Second, we can ensure that the pension benefit structure is both affordable and competitive. Third, we can increase the chances of improved investment performance through governance that ensures accountability, transparency at the Police and Fire Pension Fund. And as you begin to tackle each of those priorities, please allow me to offer a few specific suggestions. On the unfunded liability, this city should commit itself to doubling the funded status of the police and fire pension as soon as fiscal prudent. Our goal should be to increase the funded status from approximately 40% to at least 80%, no later than the end of the next decade. The question is how? Reform to benefit structure will make a significant difference on the unfunded liability. Governance changes can also reduce the unfunded liability if the increased investment returns. But we will still need to do more. I have 2 specific suggestions for you to consider. First, let's explore how we can leverage city assets to lower the unfunded liability. I have concerns about simply transferring real estate assets to the Police and Fire Pension Fund. However, the Office of Economic Development and the Department of Public Works are currently conducting an analysis to determine how we should best utilize city real estate assets. Assuming we make governance changes at the Police and Fire Pension Fund, I believe the city could sell valuable properties with the sales proceeds going to reduce the unfunded liability. Once sold, those same properties would generate annual ad valorem revenues that could also be dedicated to reduce the unfunded liability. Second, I have directed members of my administration to communicate with independent authorities such as the Jacksonville Electric Authority, JEA, to determine if we can partner to help address this unfunded liability challenge. As you know, JEA contributed a total of $237 million to the city of Jacksonville in this year's budget. The authority is our largest financial partner. Many JEA employees are in the city pension system, so our utility also has a stake in the overall retirement reform. If the city is willing to make innovative contributions toward reducing the unfunded liability, I would respectfully suggest that the Police and Fire Pension Fund do the same. At present, the states provide approximately $9 million in the so-called chapter funds to the Police, Fire, and Pension Fund. Half of these funds go to help pay the cost of base pension benefits. The other half are dedicated to enhance pension benefits. At the same time of the settlement agreement, the Police and Fire Pension Fund had a surplus of more than $20 million in its enhanced benefit account. As a part of a final agreement, the fund could agree to devote more than $20 million balance enhanced benefit account and the $4.5 million in annual enhanced benefit chapter funds to pay down the unfunded liability. As to the benefits, the settlement agreement contains some of the most significant pension benefit reform in recent Florida history. Those reforms were more aggressive than either the Florida retirement system or other major cities in Florida. In the time since that agreement, we announced and some have expressed the concern that it did not seek, quote, shared sacrifice from current employees. As my administration previously explained to this task force, Florida law protects benefits already earned by retired or current employees. That limits our ability to impact the annual city contribution or unfunded liability through changes in the benefit plan for current employees. In light of Florida law, and as a matter of fairness and competitiveness, I have concerns about too many changes to the current employee benefit package. But if the committee does intend to explore these issues, you may want to address two questions. First, what should the current employee contribution toward their pension in light of the contribution we have proposed for new employees? Second, and given recent market conditions, should we have a guaranteed 8.4% rate of return for current employees who will ultimately participate in the Deferred Retirement Option Program, known as DROP? Finally, as others have already clearly stated, we must closely review the governance structure at the Police and Fire Pension Fund. Now more than ever, it is critical that the fund produce the best possible return on its investment. Governance that values accountability and transparency can help that goal. First, the city must have a real say in decisions that have major impact on the city finances. I agree with Council President Gulliford that the city should appoint 3 members of the Police and Fire Pension Fund to the Board of Trustees. And right now, City Council selects 2 members of the board. I would respectfully suggest that as a matter of balance, the mayor should appoint the 3rd. Second, we must have the right selection process for the next Police and Fire Pension Executive Director. John Keene has provided more than 50 years of valuable service to this community, including nearly a quarter century of Police and Fire Pension Fund. We're very grateful for his service. He has served us tremendously, period. And we owe it to him to make sure that when he decides to retire, that it is so critical that we have a rigorous selection process in place and a selection criteria for the tall task that John will leave behind. It's very important that we do that. Third, we should reach an agreement on transitioning the fund from a body that locks in benefits for decades to one that solely manages assets. As you know, the city has traditionally established pension benefits with the Police and Fire Pension Fund through the so-called 30-year agreement. The document currently has an expiration date of September the 30th, 2030. This approach appears to be unique among large cities in Florida. Last month, I hosted a meeting of Florida Urban Partners, which is comprised of the mayors of Florida's largest cities. Each of the mayors in attendance expressed surprise when they heard that Jacksonville has not historically negotiated employee pension benefits through collective bargaining. Those cities which are not in the Florida retirement system have the ability to address retirement issues on a regular basis to deal with changing circumstances. In years past, we haven't had that ability. We should. Let us use this opportunity to return the discussion of pension benefits to collective bargaining process after a reasonable period of time. When your work is complete and we have a consensus plan that City Council adopts, we will be able to say that the retirement reform was a historic step for Jacksonville. It would show that together we made the right strategic choice. It would show that we are acting with vision and conviction. It will show that we are taking Jacksonville to the next level. I want to say, Mr. Chairman, and to the task force, thank you for your time today and your selfless service to our community. Words cannot express my great appreciation for your leadership, your conviction, and your commitment to help solving this problem. It is, without question, the #1 challenge we face as a city. And I believe with all my heart that whom much is given, much is required. And we have a tremendous opportunity and a responsibility and a moral obligation to really settle an issue once and for all, to ensure that this city has the opportunity to flourish and grow like other cities, that we will be able to compete in a global economy. We'll be able to attract and retain the best city employees, second to none, and it would allow us to continue to position ourselves as one of the best cities in America. I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. I thank the task force for their leadership. May God bless you, may God keep you, and may God continue to smile on you and the task force. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate it very much. It is a high calling we have, and we're convinced that we're going to get there, but it's going to take work. The complexities of this grow with me every day, and I know you all do the same, but I'm convinced that we're going to be able to come up with, as the mayor said, a consensus plan that we'll all be realizing we're sacrificing, but it'll be good for the people who are going to come after us, and that's what we're here to do. So, thank you. I'd like to call Ted Wendler, the chairman of the True Commission. Ted, if you'd come up. And he has distributed, we distributed by email the final report of the True Commission on pension reform this morning, and he has also distributed paper copies today. And many of us are confused about the True Commission, so if you tell us just a little bit about that too, to say what it is.
Okay. The True Commission is a group of 18 citizen volunteers who are chosen 6 by the mayor, 6 by the council president, and 1 by each of the 6 CPACs in the city. And we have the responsibility of alerting the city and the media and the public in general to financial issues, including retirement benefits and that sort of thing. I could have read that if I knew I was going to be asked that. Why are we here today? Because the Police and Fire Pension Fund, the PFPF, had a $1.7 billion unfunded liability at the end of September 2012. It was 39% funded to meet future benefit payments. There are 5 factors that can affect an unfunded liability: city contributions, the assets and earnings in the plan, the calculation of future pension benefits, changes in actuaries' assumptions, changes in the assumed rate of return. Has the city made the annual required contributions? According to independently audited financial statements and actuarial reports, the COJ has paid at least 100% of the annual required contributions every year. Has the fund earned the assumed rate of return? From 1976 to 2012, it was 9.59%. For 1981 to 1990, 12.4%. 91 to 2000, 12.54%. 2001 to 2012, 5.76%. The average rate of return is not a very good measure of PFPF performance. For example, if you start with a $100 investment and lose 30%, it takes 9 years at 10%, not 3 years at 10%, to get back where your investment would have been 5 years earlier without the loss. 6 years of compound interest returns have been lost. At 8.5%, it takes more than 10 years. So if the city's made the contributions and the fund has had a return that appears to be higher for most of the time, how can we have such a high unfunded liability? The percent funded is a better measure of pension plan health. It is the percentage of projected benefit payments that is covered by assets. At 100%, a pension has sufficient assets to pay all benefits earned to date by all its members. At 39%, the current percent funded, it could pay 39 cents on every dollar. The other 61% is the unfunded liability. If the PFPF investment returns had been 8.5% each year from 2001 to 2012, there would be no unfunded liability, the blue dashed line on graph number 1. The fund assets at 9/30 of 2012 were about the same as they were 9/30 of 2006. Did the city take pension holidays? That's a favorite topic. By definition, the definition of a pension holiday appears to be when the city transfers funds from, quote, reserve accounts, unquote, to satisfy any part of the annual required contribution rather than the general fund. These revenue accounts were the result of previous year overfunding contributions and were set aside as future funding assets by an agreement between the parties. How do the actuaries' calculation affect taxpayers' contribution to the PFPF? Calculations can vary considerably from one actuarial report to the next due to investment performance, experience, or changes in assumptions. It is based on the actuary's opinions, evaluations, and interpretation of past and future uncontrollable events. 2 actuarial reports prepared for 2 consecutive 3-year periods, 2008 and 2011, by the same actuary with, quote, expected UAAL for the same future years differ by $600 million. How does the PFPF Defined Benefit Plan, DB, compare to the Defined Contribution Plan? Rather than explain it, I'll just have you look at page 19. And if you have any questions later, we can discuss that. Okay, I'll continue on now. Will the PFPF run out of money? As long as the city continues to pay the annual required contribution, ARC, the PFPF will not run out of funds to pay retirees. If the city cannot afford to contribute the ARC, this may no longer be true. The combined taxpayer contributions to the PFPF, about $139 million, general employees, $20 million, and the corrections officers, $14 million for the year ending September 30th of 2013, are projected to total $173 million. about 18% of the general fund budget, and 40% of real estate tax collections of $426 million. By 2036, the taxpayers' contribution to the PFPF alone is projected to be $411 million, which is 96% of the 2013 tax collections. And that is if everything goes as the actuaries predict. That didn't work out very well for us the last decade. If you look at graph 7 on page 22, how will the new Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB, pronouncements affect the city? The assumed rate of return will decrease. It will further increase the unfunded liability and the annual required contribution. The rate will be a single rate that reflects A, the long-term expected rate of return, currently 7%, B, the rate for 20-year high-quality tax-exempt general obligation municipal bonds for benefit payments that occur in years when those amounts are no longer sufficient to cover annual benefit payments. The conclusion is that employers and plan administrators should be prepared for funded ratios reported in their financial statements to decline sharply under the new rules. In addition, plans cannot use actuarial smoothing of market gains and losses. Plan assets must be valued at market value, immediately recognizing asset gains and losses. This results in a funded ratio that clearly demonstrates the degree to which plan funding is tied to the fate of the stock market. The public has been concerned that the city cannot afford the police and fire pension fund. The True Commission has concluded that affordability is a valid concern. In May of this year, the administration, the PFPF, and the police and firefighters unions came to terms on changes to the pension plan that purportedly would have saved the city $1.1 billion over 30 years. It should be noted that the bulk of those savings would only have been realized approximately 23 years from now. Until then, the city would still have to make payments each year, ranging from $150 million to over $400 million by 2036, if the actuaries are right. The problem with this current solution is it leaves those already in the pension plan unaffected. By not addressing the current employees, it only addresses half the problem, leaving the next 23 years of escalating payments unresolved. Under any solution, the True Commission emphasizes that all future payments have to be reasonable and practical as to the city's capacity to make those payments.
You have 1 minute.
Okay. The City Council in the 2013-14 budget cycle restored many proposed cuts in spending and opted for a millage increase. The budget shortfall is directly, but not solely, related to pensions. The budget deficit for the 2013-14 year for government operations was $60 million. To provide the fund's assets, it had to increase taxes by 15%. If it takes 15% to raise $60 million, how much is required to get an additional $264 million? The answer is 81%, including the recent increase. That's if everything goes as actuaries predict, and that's not likely.
That's,
Does-
your report, I know that that's cutting you off, but the report is pretty full. I've read it twice now, the original one and now the, excuse me, the final one. So I would urge the committee to really look at it, and your suggestions are very helpful.
Just one more minute?
One more thing, right.
Does anyone believe that the taxpayers will go along with this, increasing taxes by 80%? Will the police and firemen realize that their pensions are in real danger at 39% funded and agree to adjustments of current participants' benefits before it's too late? We hope so, but if not, the True Commission concludes the two questions must be answered to resolve the financial problem with the PFPF. 1, is the 30-year agreement valid? 2, can benefits be modified for current non-vested employees? In anticipation of the answers to these questions from the courts or the Public Employees Relations Commission, the True Commission offers a listing of points that should be considered according to the answers.
And we'll take that in the report, because that's in there. Thank you, Mr. Windler, very much. And if we have questions to come back, we'll have those. Thank you. I do commend the report to you. Next, John King of the Jacksonville Police and Fire Pension Fund. Mr. King?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Mayor, Council President, Finance Committee Chairman. We have a little short response that we'd like to bring to your attention. And Carol, maybe you can give these to the committee folks. I received, no, those go to the council members. Just make sure I save one for me to talk from here. Let me have one. There you go. I'm John Keene, the Executive Director and Administrator of the Police and Fire Pension Fund. Our office is at 1 West Adams Street in downtown Jacksonville. Thank you, Mayor Brown, for those unexpected kind words. They're few and far between nowadays, and they felt good. I received an email from Jonathan Friday night at about 11:30, informing me that some of the slides in the presentation that he had presented to you earlier in the week that made headlines in the Times-Union were not exactly correct. I spoke with Jonathan on Monday and thanked him for looking into it and correcting the information. And I want to thank you all. I join the mayor in thanking you for taking time out of your schedule to tackle a big problem that's facing our community. The Police and Fire Pension Board has adopted numerous resolutions supporting comprehensive pension reform. Those resolutions have not been translated into the law of the city of Jacksonville yet, but hope springs eternal. I'm not going to comment on all of the things in Jonathan's report. I'm just going to skip right over the pension obligation bond issue. It was well worked on, and he gave you all some good analysis. Somewhat concerned about the use of 13 years as a time frame for reviewing past performance. Most financial reports are 1, 3, 5, 10, 20. However, if you pick a date, starting on April 17th and run to September 22nd of some year, you can get the numbers to say almost anything you want. One of the things you'll find in the document that I just gave to you were the S&P returns going back 40 years. The anomaly of using the last 13 years is in 2001, we had the dot-com crash. Dot-com this and dot-com that, and the market went down. They blamed George Bush, but really wasn't his fault. 2008, we had the worst financial impact in our country since the Great Recession, coupled with the worldwide financial crisis, the housing situation, and the credit freeze here in our country. So in the last 13 years, there have been two extraordinary fiscal events that impact returns in the investment community. In addition to that, the Federal Reserve continues their policy of near zero interest rates on bonds, issuing $85 billion in debt every month to keep interest rates low. If you're going to go buy something and finance it, it's a good deal. If you're an investor, it's not a good deal. If interest rates returned to the historic levels, 6% plus, the unfunded would be cut in half. Now, Ted raises the question here, Chairman Ted raised the question of how the unfunded grew. There's a simple answer to it. It's a confluence of 3 or 4 different factors. One, for every 10 people who come to work for the city of Jacksonville as police officers or firefighters, 20 years later, 9.2 are still here. We have their built-up pension obligation for their 20 years of service. On the general employee side, the 10 people that come in, 20 years later, it's right at 2 are here. So during that 19-year period, as the general employees quit, withdrew their contributions, remaining in the pension plan is the city contribution plus all the earnings. Because when you quit and withdraw your contributions, you simply get your contributions back without interest. And so it's kind of like having 2 children. One of them is a superior in school, getting good grades, surprises you by telling him one night that he wants to either be a doctor or a lawyer, and you can just see another 10 years of expenses in front of you. His older brother, 2 years older, ran off and joined the circus. So which one of these 2 children do you think cost dear old dad the most? The one that stuck around there. And that's how it is in the pension world. When people, with this constant turnover, there's not an accumulation of the unfunded obligation. That, plus what we have previously described as the extraordinary financial implications, have caused part of the problem. The simple comparison that Jonathan did for y'all on the 2 systems leaves a lot out. The general employees pension system, referred to in Jonathan's report as the JRS, the Jacksonville Retirement System, they're able to invest in a wide variety of investments that the Police and Fire Pension Fund is prohibited from doing. And as a result, the diversification of their asset base has the Jacksonville Retirement System investing in fields in areas that return a much higher rate of return. We have nothing to do with the California retirement system, and we think that was a poor choice. Over the last 5 years, as Jonathan pointed out, the returns have improved. The board's been replacing underperforming managers. We again have before the City Council legislation to expand our investment options. But the bottom line, as we stand here today, the Police and Fire Pension Fund is one party to a contract with the City of Jacksonville that runs until September 30th of 2030. And since 2000, our members have transferred and paid in over $200 million to prepay part of the benefits that we have, and they're embodied in and protected by the settlement agreement. Reasonable people can come together and find solutions. Even when we're not reasonable in some people's mind and view, we try not to be unreasonable. And so we hope that as we move forward, we're going to know that that's where we have to be. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. King. Let me just, I wrote, you said that there were 4 reasons, and I wrote the first one was the retention. The second one, I think, was the investment authority. Were there 2 others that you wanted to just briefly?
Well, part of it has to do with the Federal Reserve.
Okay, that was up
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Okay. Got it.
And the misalignment of our other investments.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. And again, thank you for serving our community. Have a great day.
You too, John. Thank you. Next, I'd like to read 3 emails from people who said that they were not going to be able to come. And I'll leave these with Carol to put in the packages. The first is from William Cassidy, Robbins Circle North, Jacksonville, Florida. I'm interested in speaking. Some of this isn't directly related to the pension, but it's related to our inconvenient time and place, so let me skip that. He just says in the last 2 sentences, our taxes and fees continue to increase. The salaries and pensions of the police and firemen are bankrupting the city. The second email is from Connie Benham, who I believe spoke to the task force at one of our early meetings. She says, my name is Connie Benham, and I've spoken before the task force in the past and had every intention of making today's meeting. There's a solution to the debt for the police and firefighters' pension debt. This solution I have brought up in the past, but most did not want to hear it, and some said it could only be done if the city were in dire straits. Sir, I believe the city has reached the point of being in dire straits on the issue and wants this solution, but many will refuse to do so unless it comes from you. The city is in possession of billions of dollars of artwork throughout the city, especially the main library. Just a few of these pieces could be sold off and solve the debt problem in one fell swoop. The city routinely adds to the banking fund debt for capital/non-capital items and annually to balance the budget. And if forced to sell assets before adding to our debt, I know they would be responsive to using existing revenue rather than annually borrowing it. Same goes for the police and fire pension fund debt on a larger scale. I know the city is nearly $5 billion in debt, and citizens in the foreclosure capital of America cannot afford more debt, and I pray you will find this to be the solution the community needs. The idea will catch flack, but we the people should not shoulder more debt when we have assets to sell. Thank you for your time. The third is from John Carr. He did not leave an address. The Jacksonville Police and Fire Pension Fund, as we know, is in bad shape and something needs to change. First, the reason for the problem needs to be understood. The problem started during Sheriff Glover's and Mayor John Delaney's terms. Glover started to promote sergeants and patrolmen to the rank of chief and above, then increased their number greatly. The mayor reduced the city's donation to the pension fund because it was well funded at the time. Then the administration approved a drop plan with a fixed return of over 8%. This, of course, was approved so the city would not have to consider the donation to the pension fund for those who enter the plan. Many of the police and fire department took advantage of this, and for 5 years the city had a holiday. When the 5 years were up and these employees left, they had to be replaced. The problem was that the city by that time had increased spending the money saved on day-to-day expenditures without taking into consideration the donation to the pension fund that would be needed when new employees were hired. Most of those who were promoted left with pensions which were inflated because they had been promoted only 5 years earlier. Now the promotion of new chiefs and above started, and 5 years later the same thing happens. When the present sheriff was elected, he increased the political appointees, which increased the cost to the pension when they retired. If it was looked at, you would find that there are a great number of political appointees that retired during the term of a sheriff, and at the end of his term, most all leave. When the talk of pension problems surfaced and it became felt that changes would be made, many of the rank and file signed up for the drop plan before it was discontinued. These employees, in a great many cases, had 20 to 25 years service. Previously, it was not uncommon for firemen and police to serve 30 to 35 years. Some things that need to be looked at. One, if the drop plan is continued, there cannot be a fixed return. It would have to be set at an amount that is below what the investments of the fund make. This would allow the pension fund to increase income from their investments. Two, employees should not be able to sign up for the drop plan before they have 25 years service. This would stop the early retirement of those with less than 25 years. Three, the city would have to fund the pension for those employees in the plan at least what Social Security would be. Employees in the job market have employers pay that amount to the government. 4, pensions were set up for the rank and file, not political appointees. If someone is appointed that is not under civil service, his rank at the time of the appointment would be used for pension purposes. They have deferred retirement plans and could fund IRAs with the increased income. 5, increased pension donations by employees 1.5%. 6, place a maximum on the amount of a pension a retiree could draw. And 7, when there are no increases in pay for the active employee, there would be no increases for those retired. So we'll thank those 3 for writing to us and note those for our files. I would like to say that I spoke to the sheriff who regrets that he couldn't be here tonight. I know the Pew folks met with him this afternoon. I talked to him over the weekend. He wants the task force to know that as we considered the unfunded liability, which is about $1.7 billion, and if we decide to fund that in some way, that at this point we should also consider the funding of the $700 million in rough amounts of the general fund, because if we go to the taxpayers now to fund $1.7 billion and say that's all we need, if we go back in 3 years and say, well, we need another $700 million, that's going to be confusing. So I just put that on our plate, even though we're not really considering those plans, that that's something to consider going forward. Those are the non-present people recommendations that I have. Next, Sandy Enos and John Ruggiero of the MAF companies have a proposal to suggest to us. Sandy and John, or just Sandy? Let me say that before Sandy starts, that I have met with him, and also I asked Bob Miller to meet with him. I don't know how thorough that has been because I haven't been able to talk to Bob, but these are proposals that some of you guys that understand investments are going to, we're going to need to get into this, but I'm hoping that it will be simple and understandable, but we may have to get into it.
Well, lunch was only an hour and a half, and we covered two major topics, but I've decided that, while we have two unique plans, I'm only going to talk to one this evening. Of course, there's so much time as this evolves and develops, we certainly would have an opportunity to perhaps review the other program. My name is Sandy Enos, and I'm with MAF Companies. We are known for the last 46 years as advisors to advisors. We create and develop programs that are quite unique, and as a result, we have virtually thousands of advisors and financial planners all over the country that utilize our programs, and we design some of the products in conjunction with some of the financial institutions to meet the needs of those programs. What I'm going to share with you tonight is really a quite unique program. I will tell you, I did come up here originally 10 years ago because I had designed the retirement plan for the ATP Tour. Now, much of what we do is based on life insurance, and yet life insurance provides certain financial advantages for families and estates, but we use it in a kind of an industrial complex. And so for those of you, what we're bringing to the municipal market is a program that is very successful in corporate America. 86% of the Fortune 1000 companies have key man insurance or have corporate-owned life insurance where the employees are insured and the benefit inures to the corporation, so it is not unusual. In the design of the program we've got, we certainly, and we've been here, I think, since the September 10th meeting, and it's been enlightening to hear the progress you're making and obviously illuminating the obstacles in the way. Whatever you decide to do with respect to funding or plan changes is not material to what we have to share with you today. We have designed a system to recover the costs that might be incurred in order to meet the financial objectives of restoring the plan to good health. And so what I am going to share with you today is what we call a legacy plan because, you know, given where we are today, and it's quite an experience, and you know, when you get to be my age, you know that sometimes from generation to generation we don't learn much and we repeat the mistakes of our fathers. But unfortunately, the people going forward in the future don't want to be in this situation again. And while the plan modifications may come to pass, we provide an opportunity to protect the pension plan and protect both plans because it can be accommodated in each of the plans in a way that is quite unusual, but it is financially extremely effective. By the way, Dr. Rupp, there are 3 major hospital systems that are looking at this right now. We know the squeeze that the healthcare system is in on revenues, and capital expenditures in the future for growth are, you know, a real problem. So I would say, I think Advocate, Banner, and one other major hospital system is getting ready to deploy this program. So anyhow, let me proceed. So as I said, this is a legacy program, and we call it the Managed Life Insurance Portfolio. If you go to page 1, the objective of the program is to create a huge financial safety net designed to support reserve requirements of the Jacksonville Police and Fire Pension Plan. Accomplish the funding using very little seed money, which is fully recoverable. Provide supplemental funding that will be delivered according to projected expectations. This is not dependent on financial markets. What happens, happens, and it happens based on an actuarial basis. The probability of achievement is guaranteed via money contracts. Results, as I said, are not impacted by investment market reversals or adverse economic cycles as long as the premiums are paid according to schedule. Now, what we're talking about is insuring members of the pension plan, and the benefit are actually employees of police and fire, and the benefits inure to the pension plan. And they do so in a very cost-effective manner. In many of the corporate purchases of key man insurance or corporate-owned life insurance, they'll establish the face amount of the policy and they'll determine what the premium is. And let's say it's $500,000 and the premium is $12,000 a year. Now, the cash value on the policies will come in and be an offset on the balance sheet for the premium cost, but it still is a expense that goes on ad infinitum. What we're doing here is a very unusual approach, and you'll see this as we develop. So the modified life insurance portfolio is a leverage strategy using purpose-built insurance contracts to generate maximum value. The program designs a recapture of all the expenses. The substantial revenue derived is assured via money contracts, as I said before, and is not influenced by economic instability. So generally speaking, future benefits, pension benefits, are funded with larger deposits today to be drawn down in the future. Life insurance benefits are minimally funded today to receive larger benefits in the future. Both rely on the same mortality results, but the life insurance can actuarially hedge pension obligations. So we look at the goal of the presentation, and that's reviewing the funding and the census, and we were provided with the census on the current employees of fire and police people. That's how we determine these rough numbers. With some assured short-term funding, project the benefits that can supplement the fund over decades to come and illustrate the financial analysis and quantify the risks. So basically, the summary of the results to be discussed for an investment of $3 million a year for 15 years. Now, I want you to, you'll see as this develops. This is a reserve account. We're not spending all of that money, but we're setting up a reserve account. And assuming that is invested at 7%, the pension plan will recover over the next 65 years a total net benefit of approximately $2.6 billion. So how do we do that? Funding assumptions. The $3 million funding reserve per year for 15 years will be allocated to support the program. We refer to this as the escrow account. The premiums start at only $728,000 for the first year, so the extra money will be invested in the early years until needed. Funds in the escrow account in excess of the annual premium requirement are vested at 7%. The total escrow account will be large enough to fund life insurance policies on 1,500 participants. And using the current census of the pension fund, we purchase amounts to be future survivor benefits insured, and insured will be representative of all age groups. And then we assume a simplified issued contract to make it easy to enroll, and we test using standard and very conservative mortality costs. The next thing is simply a graph or a spreadsheet indicating the total number of individuals in those age groups and the number that we use for our analysis. Now, why does this work and why is it so more efficient than any other insurance program I've seen in the last 35 years? Because we do it different. Basically, what we do is we insure each of those people in this particular example for $100,000 to start with. That increases to over $1 million over 15 years. Now, if you've got a group between 45 and 65, you're going to see your mortality out a ways. So the net result is we build in a COLA, we reduce the cost of the policy, and the program becomes completely self-funding in 19 years. So what happens? Well, the break-even point is 19 years, but based on what we're projecting, there would be an excess balance of $37 million in the escrow account that would not be needed for future premiums and could be returned to the pension plan. The ratio of net out-of-pocket cost to net benefits is 1.4%. That is on a pure cost basis, but you recover that. The internal rate of return is 14.3% for 65 years. I haven't seen very many investments that can guarantee that and not be subject to waffles in the market. And then we have a very aggressive, longer mortality rate that provides a little bit shorter numbers. The graph on the next page shows the return each year. Now, in the first 20 years, you can see, or the first 19 years, that we're below the line. That's the premium. And then we're, of course, accruing the difference between the premium and what's in that escrow account. Then it starts to build. By the 26th year, you've recovered your $45 million. After that, you put it in a drawer, and it just comes when it comes. And what it can do is create funds in the future to restore what you've had to pay to get this pension plan back into proper financial shape. So we look at the long-term growth based on 7%, and then I'm going to wind this up because it's not just for the pension recovery. We have survivor benefits. The participants would receive a survivor life insurance policy of $50,000. It's based on the growth of those policies. Remember what I said. We started with 100,000, became $1 million. And so as that premium cost goes up, it's like split dollar life insurance. When the deaths occurred, half of the money comes back to the pension, the other half pays for those premiums as that policy continues to grow and grow. When we're through paying...
1 minute.
Okay, when we're through paying back $2.65 billion, in essence, what happened during that period of time is the total death benefits were $5.5 billion. So half of it went to continue it. All the pension did was create the seed money to get it started, and then we paid it back. And the rest of the money just simply comes. It will protect against mistakes of the future and things that we can't determine, but it will also recover some of the costs that we may expend in order to get this program done. And so there are some other additional modifications, and it talks about how we actually derive the numbers that we have. That is just one of the programs, and it's maximum leverage. You're talking 14.3% internal rate of return, and you're able to capture $2.6 billion. If you funded a bond for $1 billion, part of the problem is paying back the principal, but it's also paying back the interest. $2.6 billion makes it a lot easier to sell.
Thank you, Mr. Enos.
right.
We will examine this further with people that have expertise in this area. Thank you.
All right.
It's very intriguing.
Okay, talk to you later.
If y'all have questions, I hope you jotted them down there. Okay, Curtis Lee, please.
Okay. Should I start now?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll take a break after Mr. Lee's presentation.
All right. My name is Curtis Lee. I'm a Jacksonville resident. Some of my background is on page 6 of the handout. I'm here to talk about the 99% of Jacksonville residents who do not get police and fire pensions but are being asked to pay more for them, and how and why they should come first. I'm hoping that you appreciate my insights, and if you have questions, please contact me. I'm on page 1 of my outline. 2 major decisions were made in 1937 that are now causing serious problems. First, the police and fire pension plan was established, and second, the city of Jacksonville decided not to participate in Social Security. Due to the age of the police and fire pension plan and fund, they are grandfathered under Florida statutes 175 and 185. They are, quote, deemed to comply even if they fail to meet the statutory requirements in those statutes. And the statutory requirements are basically a 2% per annum accrual rate and 60% salary replacement at 30 years or age 52. So then that leads to us to wonder, should those minimums or more still be met by the city? Right now, the city is doing far better than the statutory minimums in terms of offering pension benefits, which of course hurts taxpayers and is a large part of the problem. There are several causes of the problems we have, but the biggest one, and I underlined it on page 1, is that Americans live longer than they did in 1937 or 1960 or 2000, and the trend is likely to continue, especially since many comparable countries have life expectancies that are more than 2 years more than American life expectancies. Life expectancy increases have been the bane of all defined benefit plans and have been a major reason why private industry, by and large, no longer uses defined benefit plans. Plus, America is less economically dominant than it used to be, and things change rapidly. That means that America cannot make 70-year promises anymore, and yes, the police and fire pension plan is a 70-year promise for many employees. Since many employees start work around age 20 and many people live till age 90, the police and fire pension plan is in effect a 70-year promise. I would assert that the defined benefit plan model, which is the police and fire pension plan model, makes no sense anymore. Page 2. I'm going to skip over the third item in the interest of time. The fourth item, John Keene said that only 8% of police officers leave over 20 years. In my view, coming from a private industry background, that is woefully low. And I say woefully because it means that it drives up costs. Many companies conclude that if turnover is too low, they're paying their people too much and they're giving them benefits that are excessive. The police and fire pension plan benefits right now are clearly excessive, not only based on the private sector market, but simply by virtue of those statistics. People are staying on, too many people are retained. The old justifications for early retirements, some people claim there is a lesser life expectancy for police and fire employees. Those are unproven. Indeed, some other jobs like underground mining and driving cabs appear to be more hazardous. I would suggest, however, to the extent people disagree or would just want to know more, that they look into this. The idea being that if public safety employees have approximately the same life expectancies as everyone else, why should they have hugely better and earlier, lengthier pensions? Plus, the idea that pensions should cover all retirement needs, that idea is dead in America, and it's dying at the federal level. Indeed, Social Security never was intended to be the sole source of retiree support, and the average Social Security benefits slightly over $15,000 a year. So why should Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and fire employees be different? Number 8, most taxpayers feel no obligation to overcompensate public safety employees. Everybody who knows the core facts, that the average police and fire pension fund retirement starts at age 49, and that the average benefit pension now exceeds $53,000 per year, is shocked and dismayed. If further investment returns, future investment returns prove to be lower, Florida and Florida retirement system pension policy are going to follow downward. In other words, the argument that we must compete with the Florida retirement system, although it makes some sense and holds some appeal today, it's not a long-term argument, as Florida retirement system benefits are likely to be reduced. Such reductions are the long-term trend in America. The wisest states and municipalities have eliminated defined benefit plans for newly hired public employees. Now on to the JSO. In my opinion, the JSO overspends, it's insular, but most importantly, it's not had an outside audit in many years. A tough management audit is badly needed and hopefully will eventually occur. JSO staffing is the biggest driver of future PFPF pension costs. My prediction that the staffing, which has generally increased over the last decade, will flatten out or perhaps decline. The fact that JSO employment has increased over the 10-year trend, while crime has mostly declined, further supports the conclusion. Plus, population growth is slowing, and Americans are having currently fewer children than replacement levels would dictate. If I'm right, and I think I am, future JSO staffing trends will be good news for the city of Jacksonville and its taxpayers respecting pension policy. So in short, I urge you, do not panic or act foolishly simply because the Police and Fire Pension Fund inflated its UAAL by cutting its assumed rate of return. Things are very bad, but not as bad as some people say. I'm going to jump over 3 and 4 in the interest of time and go on to page 5. Because
a little over 3 minutes.
Pardon?
A little over 3 minutes.
Okay. Because taxpayers can vote with their feet, and because the city has numerous problems, I urge you to put taxpayers first, not just you as individuals, but the city. And also remember that the current taxpayers who are paying more are not necessarily the same people who allegedly got the benefit of lower taxes in the past. Also remember that Social Security is a good plan, and I would urge you to have, or to recommend that PFPF members be put into Social Security going forward. It has a sensible plan design in that it doesn't provide the fullest benefit until age 70, It seriously discourages early retirement, and the average benefit is about $15,000. Plus, by having PFPF members also in the Social Security, it dampens us versus them feelings, which are very prevalent here in Jacksonville. My recommendations on benefits is that no benefits before age 62 unless disabled, that pension benefits be capped at $50,000 a year. This is twice the Social Security maximum, approximately. A hybrid approach would be a good idea. Don't ever use drops. I never saw them in my corporate pension work. And drops encourage early retirement, which the PFPF formula also does. Don't do a 17-year deal. This is unfair, unwise, and illegal. Collective bargaining agreements cannot exceed 3 years in duration under Florida law. Incidentally, the Denton lawsuit, which you've all heard about, if it succeeds, it basically will, in my opinion, render the 30-year agreement attackable and possibly unenforceable as to the remaining 17-year duration. And the last point I have under Part 5 is that current employees should share in benefit reductions. It's commonly done elsewhere. When Social Security was changed in 1983, the modifications hurt current employees, current workers. I know I was one of the current workers, and all of a sudden, things were changed on me. It happens, it's been done, and it's common. It should be done here. Remember, taxpayers are suffering from a 14% property tax increase. Current employees should share the pain. Part 6 is regarding structural reforms. I urge, first, there's no need for the Police and Fire Pension Fund Board of Trustees to exist in the first place. But secondly, even if it did, it doesn't have to administer the Police and Fire Pension Plan. The Jacksonville retirement system is a case of joint administration. Pension plans and funds are often jointly administered, economies of scale and all that. I criticize the current Police and Fire Pension Fund and urge you to seek structural changes. Last page. I already mentioned the fact that the 30-year agreement is probably not going to be enforceable if Denton wins. But further, the 30-year agreement, if it is an agreement, can be modified by agreement. 30-year agreements are not common, but any long-term agreement that exists can be modified. But I urge you...
One more minute, yeah.
Okay. If you consider pension obligation bonds, I would say don't do them unless you get huge concessions. If you consider any other long-term fix, get huge concessions on structure. The city must take control of the Police and Fire Pension Fund because it contributes over 85% of its funding. It's simply fair. Never, ever, ever adopt a millage dedicated to the PFPF. Remember, everyone else suffered a 14% increase. Dedicated millages are hard to undo. And the PFPF, because it is a bad entity in my view, should not get a permanent funding source. Lastly, I ask that you consider recommending a forensic audit of the PFPF for the reasons set forth in the attachment, and also ask that appropriate authorities conduct investigations into the PFPF's misconduct, also set forth in the attachment. I dug up an awful lot of stuff without any particular power, just the Public Records Act, and look at all the bad things I found. It suggests that there may be more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. It is now 6:30. Let's take a break until 6:40. We'll come back. There are, one person came up who had to leave who had sent an email that I didn't receive. I'm just going to read it real quickly like I did the other one since we'll add it to our list. His name is Frank Kilacki. Here are his thoughts. Learning lesson. Jacksonville's pension debacle is more than a crisis. It is an example of at best gross malfeasance by past and current mayors, councilmen, police and fire union leaders, and pension fund administrators. The Times Union would serve the public well by expanding their investigative reporting so taxpayers can better understand how we got to this stage over the past 30 years. 2, responsibility. All parties must share in the pension reform pain. Taxpayers, however, should not be subjected to the majority of the pain. The chairman's article seems to imply that the concept of a pension plan for police and fire, although perhaps modified, will continue forever. A defined contribution plan needs to be instituted for future hires, and some level of modification of benefits for current retirees may need to be explored if feasible. 3, governance. The total cost of police and fire consumes approximately 50% of the city's operating budget, $500 million or so. The city, mayor, and council must have absolute control over the pension component. The irresponsible performance and self-dealing of the current fund administrators. I'm going to skip over the personal attack, but that must be audits for the legality of their actions. 4, the task force needs to vet all of the financial figures used in the reform. For example, what are the accounting and actuarial standards used to calculate rates of return? Discount rates, mortality rates, the value of fund assets, the unfunded liability, and annual pension cost. Government standards are not always the most realistic compared to private sector standards. All rates need to be compared to not just other government bodies, but also the private sector where informative. 5, pension reform impact on the city's future. Any solution recommended needs to clearly describe the financial impact on the city's balance sheet and related risks, bond rating, cash flow, and reserves, as well as the ability to handle future challenges. Restructuring benefits should be first determined before use of pension bonds is considered, but all options need to be evaluated. Jack's Vision 2025, Downtown Investment Authority, port expansion, and the continuing challenges of a struggling public school system and the city's high crime rate are all examples of major potential funding needs. 6, taxpayer buy-in. The mayor, city council, and the task force must communicate the alternatives and their best recommendations to the taxpayers and achieve a reasonable level of buy-in from taxpayers. That communication must describe the strengths and weaknesses of any proposal and related risks. 7, do it right for once. The mayor, city council, and task force must do it right the first time, no matter how painful. Taxpayers reject gamesmanship to get through elections or city leaders playing hardball with taxpayers but softball with each other. Administering pain and pensions while secretly granting benefits in other areas or pushing out reform to the out years are examples of this. Fairness. All taxpayers, despite the damage done to them, want to achieve fairness to the rank and file of police and fire in any actions taken. Frank Kilkackie, Salt Meadow Court South. Robert Asaph was here, was going to speak, but he was unable to stay. He will send us some information. Johnny Woolfolk, right here, yes.
Good afternoon. I'm kind of new at this, okay? But first of all,
would you just state your name and
yes,
address,
my name
please?
is Johnny Lee Woodfolk. That's WOODFAULK, and I am the junior, okay? Now, I'm here. First of all, I would like to be able to say, as they say, about the Saturday's paper, it says, the presentation sold the pension fund and short on the returns. Now, I have here in my presence also up under the Duval County School Board and up under the employee social security number, which is 267-383046. And also it says that was the employee covered by a qualified pension plan, and this says yes, okay? Now, I would like to first of all ask, up under the presentation, and it sold the pension fund and the short on the returns, how much was it sold for? Can anybody give me that answer?
I didn't hear your question.
I said, up under the metro section of Saturday's paper, it says that the presentation sold the pension fund and short on the returns. I'm asking, how much was the pension fund sold for?
Well, it wasn't sold.
It wasn't so. Oh, that's what the paper say now. It says the pension, the presentation sold the pension fund.
What?
So the word sold is sold. Now, so if it wasn't sold, then evidently there was a error on the newspaper.
What was intended, I think, by the headline in the paper was that the presentation last week sold the pension fund short in its investment returns.
Right, and
Okay.
I'm talking about the investments.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, and then I also have a policy here that's up under the same employee Social Security number that I just recited, that it says your Florida retired public employees, and the policyholder is your retired public employees of the state of Florida, okay? And the certificate number is 1-1015101-0, okay? And the certificate holder is Beatrice W. Ziegler, okay? And that was my mother, okay? So upon the other documents that I do have, and up under, as they say, custom banking statements and imports files that has been done here, by the way, here in the city of Jacksonville and in the state of Florida. You know, I'm very concerned about what has been done, because what has been done, there has been some things that has been done, by the way, to my mother and to me. And I'm not trying to make it personal, but upon what has been done, I would like for papers that I have signed with property that I have sold in this estate that I'm dealing with. And it says that the property or the service has not been received. And I mean, you know, upon an agreement is agreement. And that's one of the reasons why the budget, and I ain't talking about this budget, I'm talking about the full federal budget is shut down, okay? And like I say, you know, I don't like being used, especially with my social security number up under the data that's there. I'm not that kind of guy. You know, up under the entity and up under the data that's there, the only thing I want, you know, is what's properly due to me. Y'all can continue with y'all running of y'all government the way y'all run. I ain't got nothing to do with that. You understand?
Mr. Wolf, I think the general counsel wants to say something. Let me just interrupt you.
I just thought, as this matter isn't really in front of you, I could step outside with the gentleman and see if I could address his concerns.
That'd be helpful.
If that's all right with you? Okay. Let's do that.
We don't want to cut.
One thing about it,
we don't want to cut you off.
I got a lot of witnesses here, okay? And up under the instructions of the documents.
Sure.
They say,
Right.
Yeah, okay.
She can help you with that.
And
And Cindy, if he feels like he would like to say, he's got a little more time. So if he feels, sure.
oh, well, you know, well, one thing about it, I appreciate y'all allowing me to take the floor. And I don't want to take no more of your time. You know, I've said what I had to say. And as far as what has to be done, by God's grace, I'm going to be the messenger.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
And these documents that I'm dealing with, they are going to get delivered where they got to go.
Ms. Laquadera will help.
All
you.
right, let me get.
Thank you so much. John Nooney.
Okay, why am I here? Well, Florida Times Union, every issue, it's worth getting into. And, you know, the public will have a chance to speak on pension crisis. Oh, my name is John Nooney, 8356 Bascom Road, Jacksonville, Florida, 32216. And, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, truly do. Okay, what is coming? And I'll just read this sentence, you know, from the story. It will take both community will and sacrifice to achieve retirement reform so that public safety employees receive the benefits that they have been promised by elected officials. I just want to say, welfare. The government will pay you if you don't work. Glorified welfare, 2005-1007. It's an ordinance, and that will go towards the general pension liability. But I know we're talking about the police and fire pension fund, and for me, I have to just share with you, when I think about this, I think of pension flight. Recently, the Police and Fire Pension Fund voted a pension for a convicted child molester with board approval. So there's a part of me that every day, in Duval County, I just say to myself, my gosh, there are surrounding counties. And, think of how many people are outside in Nassau, Clay, St. John's, Putnam, and we are seriously looking at doing that. We are broke. The public trust has been crushed in this community. So what could be a potential answer? We're looking at bringing people back to Jacksonville, especially back to downtown. Now, I don't know if this exists anywhere, but think of, and we talk about taxes, how about the pension tax? If you are receiving a pension and you are outside of Florida, how about a 50% penalty? If you're in Florida, it reduces to 25. And you know what? If you come and stay in Duval County, it's 0. How fast would that reduce some of the pension liability? And here again, it'll require maybe the governor, it'll definitely require, a lot more, than this. So anyway, that was just one thought. Now also, I just want to for the benefit of Curtis Lee, I just want to continue on page 3, because, and when my time runs out, I again, just appreciate the opportunity to have been able to participate. So this is page 3 from Curtis Lee's draft. What is the UAAL and what are its implications? The unfunded actuarial accrued liability. You have heard about the UAAL, but never forget that the UAAL is only quasi-liability. It is not debt in the traditional sense, far from it. The UAAL can be hugely reduced or even eliminated by virtue of policy and assumption changes, such as changes to the ARR, assumed rate of return, major layoffs and benefits changes, etc. Because of its unique nature, the City of Jacksonville should not obsess about eliminating the UAAL events. In fact, events may help out. Plus, if the Police Fire Pension Fund ever became fully funded again, the unions will demand even richer pensions. They sought and got hugely better pensions in the late 90s after 2 decades of bull markets. They will try again, even if the money is there. Mark my words. The logical conclusion: don't tempt union leaders and politicians by providing extra funds to any DBP, the Defined Benefit Plan, such as the Police Fire Pension Fund. Police and Fire Pension Fund officials have repeatedly expressed interest in increasing benefits even these last 4 years. If any city wants to weaken or decertify its public employee unions, which are good objectives, it is wise not to over-contribute to the defined pension benefit, especially one as corrupt and badly run as the Police Fire Pension Fund. This conclusion, which means no pension obligation bonds unless major concessions are given, and no dedicated millage ever, is further supported by points raised in number 3 below. It is wiser to reduce the Police Fire Pension Bonds UAAL by means of policy changes, such as increasing the ARR to 7.75% used by the FRS and the average Florida pension plan by cutting the JSO and JFRD budgets. going forward, and by cutting benefits for new city hires and cutting future accruals for current employees. Also, CAJ can impose pension benefit changes respecting non-union members of the Police and Fire Pension Fund. These non-union employees could get lesser or no future benefits starting now. This would save dollars and provide a template for later use with labor unions. It would also show unions how serious the city of Jacksonville is. Many corporate plans offer differing benefits to different classes of employees, and companies have often cut benefits of salaried employees as a precursor to collective bargaining. Okay, number 3, further reasons to be careful and hard-nosed. Number 1, the Police and Fire Pension Fund is badly run and unaccountable due to its structure. The attachment provides details. Number 2, the Police and Fire Pension Fund has never had a forensic audit, and otherwise, audits of the Police and Fire Pension Fund have been too limited and too few and far between. Number 3, the Police and Fire Pension Fund and City of Jacksonville made huge mistakes, mainly in the 96-2002 period, which are now harming City of Jacksonville taxpayers. The sources of those mistakes, the ineptitude of COJ leaders, and their desire to please public employees have not disappeared. Expect more ineptitude and misconduct. Number 4, the City of Jacksonville has a few special advantages. Unlike New York and a handful of cities, it is not an international beacon and cannot afford to continue to offer gold-plated benefits of public employees. Number 5, unemployment is high, and it appears that police and fire jobs have backlogs of applicants and interest. I greatly doubt that we need to pay rich pensions to attract officers argument. Most 22-year-olds do not plan that far ahead. I can remember when I was in my early 20s, pension benefits were then of no interest to me. In short, the employer, the City of Jacksonville, has greater unused power. And page 4, number 4, key facts relating to the Police and Fire Pension Fund and City of Jacksonville pension policy. Number 1, historically, JSO and JFRD employees have retired at age 49. This is unheard of in the private sector, unsustainable and very foolish. Number 2, thus, JSO and JFRD employees get Police and Fire Pension Fund benefits no longer periods than they worked on average.
2 minutes, Mr. Nooney.
Okay. 3, further, those employees get far more from the Police and Fire Pension Fund than they earned via salary. The current average Police and Fire Pension Fund retiree is over $53,000 a year, and in 2014 will be about $55,000, thanks to the 3% COLA. Number 5, yet the COJ has a moderate cost of living, and the average COJ resident and household earns less than the average JSO and JFRD retiree, nor does such average residents have a 3% COLA. Number 6, thus the status quo operates as a major transfer or wealth to the privileged few via taxes. This is unattainable, unjust, and perhaps unique. The handful of places with more generous public pension schemes tend to be high wage and high cost of living cities where high pensions are matched with high average salaries. Plus, the Police and Fire Pension Fund COLA, coupled with the rule of 72, means that most Police and Fire Pension Fund retirees will have pensions that are more than twice their initial pensions before they die. This means that the average new Police and Fire Pension Fund retiree will receive over $2 million from the Police and Fire Pension Fund. The City of Jacksonville currently contributes over 85% of the Police and Fire Pension Fund costs, yet lacks control of it. Similar perverse statistics will continue for years, barring major reform. Number 10, in contrast to the Police and Fire Pension Fund average retiree pension of $55,000, in 2014, the average Social Security benefit in 2014 will be $15,492 a year.
30 seconds, Mr.
And young Americans do not get full Social Security until age 67, plus no one collects Social Security prior to age 62 unless they are disabled. When Social Security was reformed in or about 1983, current workers were affected. Let this be a lesson for the City of Jacksonville. Given all the above statistics, the average Police Fire Pension Fund member collects about 3.5 times as much as the average American via Social Security and twice as long, 7 times the benefit or more if one factor in time value of money.
Thank you, Mr. Nooney.
Okay.
We've got
Well,
these
thank
two,
you
so
for-
we've got each of these are before us.
Thank you
I'm
for
trying to hold to
listening.
get everybody in before we ask the questions. Yep. Okay, next is Joseph Strasser. There's the Strasser.
I'm Joseph A. Strasser. I live at 3400 San Jose Boulevard. I came to Jacksonville as the first budget officer in May of 1968. And one of the things I did was I signed up for pension, and they told me I was on the county transitional payroll. So they told me that you can't be on the county pension because county pension is closed. And they said you can't be on the city pension because you're a county employee. So I'm under the Florida retirement system and Social Security. And my pension plan, the Florida retirement system, is about 89% funded. As a civilian employee, I'm doing very well. I'm a philanthropist, multimillionaire who gives away. And so by not having money, the increased pension from the city, I would end up with giving less. The point I'm trying to make here is that you do, and you have a job to do, and you do what you have to do. And when I retired, I decided I'd be a philanthropist. Now, my experience goes back 36 years in 4 local governments, and I've never seen a pension problem in my life like the city of Jacksonville. And when I speak at the city council all the time, and they give you 3 minutes, and the question came up, well, what did you do about it? Well, when I was there, and I retired July 1st, 1995, we had no problems. The pension plan was okay. As the budget officer, I put together budgets, and part of the budget is pension. And part of the payroll relates to salaries and pension and health benefits and all these other things relate to each other. And I can tell you right now that I saw no problems. If there had been a problem, it would have been resolved. We have now an unsustainable pension plan. You know it, everybody knows it, and so what do you do about it? Well, one of the things that I would do about it is what Mayor Kasim Reed did in Atlanta. He took and set up a certain date when the existing pension plan stopped. We're not taking away anything from anybody. We're saying that as of a certain date, everything will change. And the suggestion there was, and one of the things that the mayor did was, I'm also a fan of Meet the Press, the longest running TV program. And Mayor Kasim Reed got on Meet the Press, and I think he got on there because of his pension plan. Now you say, well, do you know what's going on in the police and fire pension fund? That's what we're talking about. Well, by Sheriff Dale Carson appointed me as the first civilian chief of budget and management for the sheriff's office. I was not very popular. Civilians rate second in the sheriff's office. But I was a full chief, not an assistant chief, a full chief, and I understand police. And then Mayor Godbold appointed me as the first civilian chief of public safety, which is now called fire rescue. And I stayed there 9 years, 6 years in the sheriff's office. I understand police and firemen, and I want them to get the benefits that they have accrued. I don't want to take away anything from anybody that they have earned. The proposition is, what about the future? I told you what Kasim Reed did. Okay, how about Florida Blue? They have two pension plans, the existing pension plan and a 401k. And I would support a 401k for the new employees and the existing employees who stay on. They need to stay on there because that's the only way this thing will survive. You gotta understand, I've been in this business, like I said, 36 years. If there's anything I know, it's budgeting and finance. And I don't want us to, I want consolidation to succeed. That's why I came here, because of consolidation. I had a job offer in large Virginia County, and for some reason, I called it, I mentioned it at the city council meeting, if you remember that, Mr. Anderson. I called it divine guidance. There was something that made me not take that job because I love consolidation. And for consolidation to fail, like Stockton, California, and like Detroit, would be a disaster. We have the best form of government. Sure, there's weaknesses. The police should have been under the mayor, but there was a compromise that was made. And the sheriff should have had corrections and the courts, the bailiffs. But that would not have sold consolidation, so they made compromises. But I'm saying to you, if you don't change the pension plan to give the new employees a 401k and the existing employees, you give them the same benefits. If they want to retire, they can retire. The 8.4% was mentioned is ridiculous. The general employees don't have it. They have a floating plan. I just can't see us going downhill. It would be a disaster. I'm 81 years old. I'm an old man. I call myself a nutty old retired has-been. And all I can do is give away money to education, to all kinds of things. I won't be here that long. It won't affect me. But it will affect the people who are there, and they're suffering. People are suffering. We can't continue to have tax increases. We can't continue to have the police and fire pension fund administer the negotiations, which should be done by collective bargaining. It was thrown at me, he said, well, did you know that Georgia doesn't have collective bargaining? That's where I came from, DeKalb County. And frankly, that wasn't the issue. The issue was we put so much money in the pension plan. Our pension plans in DeKalb were sound. Our pension plan in Savannah was sound. And in Wichita, Kansas was sound. Every place I've been at. This is the first time. And for God's sake, we need to change it. And I urge you to come up with a plan, not 266, not that ordinance. Let's not play games with the people. This is a critical decision for consolidation government, the future of consolidation. The future of consolidation depends on this decision, and then we're going to have to do the general employees and the correctional employees, and we've got to do it. And you say, well, what does Florida Blue, 1 minute, what does Florida Blue have to do with us? It has everything to do with us. You have to be realistic. You have to pay what you have available. You can't spend money that you don't have. And the issue is, one of the things that I talk about all the time, we've heard about the banking funds with the city, we've heard about spending. Spending is the problem. And if there's one thing that I stand for is reducing spending. It's not raising more revenues, and for God's sake, let's not have no bond issues. We've had banks, we've had people fail on that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Strasser. Thank you for your long service to our community. I've got, everybody that I have heard from to speak has spoken except for two who wanted to be near the end. Is there anyone else? Bill? I see Bill Gassett and
Derwin Davis.
all right, wait a minute. Yeah. Derwin Davis, Bill Gassett,
Dan Carr.
Dan Carr. And what? Mr. Oliver.
Cecil Hopkins.
Cecil Hopkins. Okay. I think we're going to have to go to 5 minutes now. So, yeah.
John Winkler.
Oh, okay, John Winkler, okay.
And then one up front here.
Joe Andrews.
Joe Andrews. Okay, well, let's go to 5 minutes. It's now 10 after 7. So, I can't read my own handwriting. Mr. Dunn, I think? Well, Mr. Gassett was first. Bill? And keep in mind, you spoke to us, so we hope that, and we appreciated that, so we hope this is new material. Good.
And as I hand out my updated literature, let me also echo congratulations to you folks for exhibiting the patience of Job on this. I know what you're going through. Let me also pay a compliment to the guy on your behalf of the Fireman and Pensions Plan who designed this program back in 2001. He is an absolute genius, and I think he should be given a Nobel Peace Prize for that, and I'm serious. What I've got here is two things. It follows on your comment regarding how to pay for the now it's 1.7 million, I'll say 1.5 million. And I call it the unbond approach as opposed to the bond approach. And I said, okay, look, if they'll take back a note, that is the people from the PFPF, and we agree to pay it off over 10 years at 6%, which is a reasonable, I think, rate of return for them. That's how the numbers would flow. It's just a suggestion of how to look at it and what you offered about raising the millage. If you stretch it out to 15 years, the numbers would be a little bit less of a tax increase, and you can see how it's a declining balance on the simple interest. It does require, on average, Mr. Gulliford, about a 13% tax increase. I don't care where the source comes from, but you're going to have to raise it if they will sign off on accepting and taking a note back. The second part of my page 3 is I retitled that the class of, and my thrust to you here is to reconsider your thinking on what's happened in the past and what's going forward. I think it's a great mistake to combine all the money into one big pot. For example, why I say that is, let's say that somebody signed on in 1988. He would be the class of 1913. That's when he'd be eligible for, I'm sorry, let's go to 1993. The 20-year is when he graduates to this system. Well, in that year, his group has earned the 7%. There is a 2% dividend, which I have not included in here. They've made 9% based on the numbers I've heard kicked around. That class is going to be taken care of, and so on down the line. You can see, as other speakers have said, the early part of this century have been extremely disastrous for all types of financial investments. Now, the adjunct professor here with the Pew folks, I agree with him, get out of having people manage the funds. The Dow Jones on a long-term basis, which is what you're concerned about, is hard to beat on an average annual basis going much more than 15 years. Yes, some people have had hot hands, some have had cold hands, but the point is you have to have something you can rely on that's there day in and day out. And my thrust is, if you don't have to worry about paying she said, paying that 0.5% toll to some money managers who do good or don't do good, and you can eliminate the management staff to just a senior person, maybe pay him $125 a year, and a good secretary $55 or $60, all the money goes to you guys. But notice here, anybody who signed on in 1997, 4.8 plus about 2.5, you're going to make the numbers for them. The sad guys here, the guys who came on the class of 03, it's going to be a hard time. Something else here, you will note down at the bottom of that page, the dividends increase with the Dow Jones. Right now it's 2.2%. But if you started in the class of the year 15 and you put money in there and managed it that year by itself, separately as a separate account, that's up to 4%. Because these big, large blue chip companies do increase their dividends and payouts to clients. So shift from the short-term strategies, a lot of guys who come to you to say, we want to manage your money, and let's go with something we know works and is there to be counted on. It's also easy to understand when you have a downtime because the whole market is down. Other than that, that's about all I got to say. I know you're not going to ask for questions, but if anybody has a question, I'll be glad to stick around. If not, I'll head out of here. Anybody want to stick around, just say yes or no. Okay, thanks very much for your time.
We appreciate it very
Good
much,
luck on it.
Mr. Gassett. Thank you. Before I forget, Eric Smith had to leave, and he reminded us he had passed out some brochures about some investment alternatives a couple of meetings ago, and he just asked us to refer back to those. Mr. Dunn, did I get that right? Mr. Carr?
My name is Dan Carr, longtime Jacksonville resident.
Would you say your address too, please?
4428 Breakwater Row West. I'm a retiree from the private sector. With a $1.7 billion unfunded liability, the Police and Fire Pension Fund is one of, but not the worst, managed among its peers. Solutions offered have included issuing pension obligation bonds and giving prime buildings and waterfront property to the fund to lessen this figure. POBs are a universally bad idea. This is an extreme example of kicking the can down the road for the next generation. Real estate would not receive a fair value and is also a short-sighted bad idea. Present COLAs, including COLAs for survivors, are a lavish benefit, as is the free, no-cost to retiree survivors benefit of 75% of pension. Normal practice in the real private sector world, of which I am part, is zero COLA, zero survivor benefit, unless the latter is paid for by the retiree. The existing pension scheme is based on an illegal 30-year agreement. Florida law very clearly states that no collective bargaining agreement may endure for more than 3 years. This agreement can and should be thrown out and renegotiated now. The DROP program needs to be stopped now. Who in this room, other than DROP participants, is receiving over 8% interest on their funds? In these days of fractional interest rates, this is ridiculous. The governance and management of the pension fund has proven itself to be a client of interests other than the rank and file employees or taxpayers by engaging in ill-advised legal actions against citizens requesting operating information with consequent loss, by disputing a retiree's benefits with consequent loss, by awarding nearly $2 million value total pension to a convicted child molester, and by extreme junketing at considerable cost to the fund. Another egregious act by management is the so-called Senior Staff Voluntary Retirement Plan, or SSVRP. This plan continues to exist, although certain COJ legal opinions state that it's illegal. Its present net worth to one beneficiary is around $2 million. The foregoing is only a partial list of actions condoned by the present Board of Trustees. This brings me to the solution to our current PFPF pension mess. Since the fund is a creature of statute, it can be dissolved by statute. All the legislature has to do with the City Council is declare that all the assets, liabilities, rights, and obligations of the former pension fund are now the assets and liabilities of the consolidated city. Many significant improvements in governmental operations would immediately occur. This may require a J bill, or it may need a referendum, but it can be done. This is a benefit. The assumed rate of return would be set using the same actuaries and the same set of assumptions being used by the general employee's pension plan and the correctional officer's retirement plan. No more crazy surprises on that front, whatever the final result of current pension reform efforts. The dissolution of the fund would eliminate the absurd and illegal argument that the public safety unions ever had the right to transfer their collective bargaining powers to the pension fund in the first place. To the extent those unions claim they have quote, waived their rights to negotiate pension rights by trying to transfer them to the fund, the assumption of all the fund powers by the city would bring about a true waiver unless the unions reclaimed the right to negotiate on behalf of their members. Litigation on that score would then be pointless. C,
One
it would
minute.
It would end the inherent conflict of interest between the fund acting as the fiduciary manager over public funds, while simultaneously acting as the advocate seeking additional benefits for the employees and pensioners. Success in one role means compromising the duty owed in the other. Elimination of public payment of the fund's extraordinary out-of-town council legal expenses. Past litigation with wronged pensioners have resulted in extremely high litigation costs paid by the fund to South Florida lawyers whom they employ routinely. The OGC labor lawyers are fully capable of handling any litigation over the right to or amount of benefits which should be paid to any retiree.
30 seconds. And if you want to leave that with us, we'll be glad to duplicate it.
Okay, thank you. Dissolution of the fund would eliminate the public expense of paying for separate counsel in cases involving the fund's public records disclosures and complicity in public meeting law violations. It is past time for the City Council to request that the Florida legislature declare that the purposes for which the fund was created in 1937 have been fulfilled and that the 1968 consolidation of public entities and functions in Jacksonville and Duval County is best served by dissolving the Police and Fire Pension Fund and its Board of Trustees. Thank you
very much. Mr. Oliver?
My name is Carney Oliver. My address is 8527 Oak Leaf Road. I'm gonna make a point. Mr. Streiser is one of those people that comes to a lot of city council meetings, and he's one of the people that has a lot of rich information. And with his assistance, he can help you solve some of the problems. And I trust Greg Anderson to really give some footnote in how we can solve some of these problems because his background is in finance. And I see that he works hard on the city council to try to solve some financial issues. But I also want to take in ideas of maybe getting more contributions out of them, out of the police officers. But I also want to know is if they want free land, they need to be like JEA, pay a franchise fee. If you want to manage property, the city needs to get something out of it too. If we're going to do business together, we got to be able to meet each other halfway. This gentleman made a point about the pension board could be dissolved. That could be a negotiation bargain. That is, if the pension board doesn't want to play fair, you can crush them with one blow, going straight to Tallahassee and take them completely out, and you can do whatever you want. But you don't want to handle people in any kind of way. You want to be fair, you want to be just. But if people don't want to do business fairly with you, sometimes you got to take extreme measures to let them know that you're not playing with them. If what this gentleman had to say was if we could dissolve that board, bring it back into the city, and let the city figure out what they got to do, so be it. Sometimes you have to burn some bridges to build a new house or a new bridge. Some things we have to do that are necessary. People may not like them, but at the end of the day, you're going to get the means of the results that you need. You know what you have to deal with. But I think that they'll be willing to work because now people are bringing fresh ideas. And they don't want to lose that piggy, lose that goose that they've been eating on for a long period of time. So I would like to see if y'all could bring in Joseph Streiser to help do an audit, especially of JSO, especially of both entities, because simple fact is that one particular agency knows how to manage their budget, but the other one doesn't. Maybe you can find some savings in the fire department because they don't manage their books fairly, because there's another young lady sitting in the crowd right now. She's always bringing up information of how they cannot manage their books effectively. There needs to be an independent audit of both industries, and let's find out exactly what's going on. And then you can take those savings and apply it to what is unfunded liability. And if you can't get those entities to agree on that, then you need to start talking about the Florida legislature. You have a mechanism that is, I would say, is blackballing in plain terms, but this is a way to get people's, what John Boehner said at a caucus meeting before his House representative Republicans to get a deal done with Obama. He told his House, get your butt in line so that we can get this deal done. If they don't want to get in line, you know what you got. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is it Cecil Hopkins?
H-O-S-K-I-N-S.
Hoskins.
Good evening. My name is Cecil Hoskins. I live at 1229 McGurts Creek, Jacksonville, Florida, 32221. I have served as a firefighter paramedic for 28 years here in the city of Jacksonville and have lived here all my life. For those who don't think that the taxpayers are footing the bill, I am one of those taxpayers. I do the job too, and I pay my taxes fair and share. Okay, so I do contribute. There's some controversy on whether we contribute to our pension fund or not. That's always insinuated that we do not. We contribute 7% to our pension fund of our salary every year, every payday. No ifs, ands, buts about it. No holidays for us. We contribute. When the times were tough, we were even willing to take a 2% pay cut, which cost the city more money than it ever saved them. Had they asked us at that time to contribute the 2% to the pension fund, that would have increased our pension contribution to 9%. Now, based on simple numbers, and I'll give you this paperwork afterwards, if the median salary was $5,000 per month, the present contribution is $350 per month per person. If you multiply that by 1,000, it's $350,000 a month that we contribute to our own pension. If, instead of taking the 2% pay cut, they had said, let's contribute that 2% to the pension fund, that's not something our union negotiates, that's something the pension board negotiates with the city council, and was also part of the mayor's proposal, was a 2% increase. That increase would have brought our contributions to $450 per month, or $450,000 per month for 1,000 people. Over a period of 5 years, truth is there's 3,000 police and fire. You can multiply the numbers and you'll find it been an $18 million savings over the 5 years that we'll take the pay cut. The city didn't save that much money. Now it's been said, let's turn the pension board over and let the city council take over. Let the politicians take over. It's the politicians that spent $200 million more than we had on a courthouse. They went over budget, $200 million. It is the politicians in the White House and in the Congress that manage Medicare and Social Security. And I think the term they use for that now is it is bankrupt. Am I correct on that? That's the terminology they use for those that are managed by our government. We have to have private entities manage our fund. Now, 2 private entities came up here tonight and gave actuaries. One of them gave a 20-year and a 30-year actuary based on a 13-year plan. Actuaries should be based, if you're doing a 20-year plan, on 20-year returns. If you're doing a 30-year plan, it should be based on 30-year returns. John Keene was right. I can pick any date and any time I want to, and I can make numbers read the way I want to. The fact is, the city's not making right decisions. The politicians aren't making right decisions. City Council turned down a good proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Let's don't have any demonstrations. Joe Andrews, please.
I'm Joe Andrews. I live at 7198 Cypress Cove Road, Jacksonville. Chairman Shy and task force members, I'm glad to see the work that you're doing, but I fear that your efforts are going to fall far short of that which is needed. In 2 of your earlier sessions, I heard both of your outside consultants state that their interest would be to approach this problem with a forward-looking perspective. To my mind, that is code speak for we will suggest ways and methods to eradicate the UAAL gap. I have no doubt that they will do that because they've done it before for other people. While those suggestions may fill the gap and solve the problem faced by the Pension Fund Board of Directors, they will not solve the problem faced by the city and the Duval County taxpayer. The True Commission has already listed many of the suggestions mentioned, but filling the gap does nothing to repair the deficiencies that cause the gap. When fully acknowledged and left unresolved, the scope of this problem is sufficient to bankrupt this city. As I see it, the problem is rooted in historical actions that exhibit a variety of missteps and weaknesses spanning over the last 35 years. In the True Commission study on page 13, if you'll look quickly, there's a simple graph of the pension fund assets as a percentage of the actuarial benefit. 1991 was the last year that the pension was fully funded. Now it's 39% funded. The inquiring mind automatically wants to know why the fund has been in free fall for more than the last 20 years. The answer is in the history and will not be explained by a one-sided perspective. So I urge you to broaden your scope of inquiry to include a thorough, comprehensive, forensic analysis of the plan design, scope, sustainability, desirability, and purpose. This analysis must be done in an atmosphere of rationality, objectivity, and dedication to all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Winkler?
Thank you. John Winkler, 2515 Oak Street. I am president of the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County, although I am here in a private capacity. Let me say this. I am happy that the mayor expressed the idea that this task force should attempt to come up with a comprehensive reform plan that can be implemented in a timely fashion. I believe, though, that in order to come up with something that is truly comprehensive, that it is going to have to take consideration, and not just consideration, but the actual steps that are necessary legally in order to dissolve the Board of Trustees of the Police and Fire Pension Fund. I'm not going to repeat all of the reasons why the board has no place in the consolidated government of Jacksonville. I think you've heard plenty of that, and you've seen a lot more of it on paper. But the mayor's suggestion that mere governance changes would be enough, I believe, is not going to do the job. The administration of the city has to have direct control of the Police and Fire Pension Fund, if for no other reason, in order to achieve the economies of scale that can be done by managing all of the pension funds under one umbrella. There are political and practical mechanical aspects to consider in order to accomplish the abolition of the Board of Trustees. First of all, as Mr. Lee pointed out, chapters 175 and 185 are not a stumbling block to actually abolishing the board. Because this board was created before May of 1939, it follows under a very narrow statutory exception that the Division of Retirement has recognized in a letter that it issued in January of 2011. expressing essentially the fact that Miami and Jacksonville are unique in Florida in being able to still receive chapter funds while not having to follow all of the dictates of 175 and 185. And in 175 and 185, there are administrative requirements that otherwise would require you to maintain a police and fire pension board. That is not the case here, however. There is, though, a practical consideration in terms of how you go about abolishing the board. If you can't accomplish it by way of a J bill and persuade the Florida legislature to do it for you, then there is inherent power in the charter of the city of Jacksonville in 3.01 to accomplish it. But because the Board of Trustees are created under the charter, in Chapter 22 of the charter, it is a possibility, one which should be explored by having the mayor or the president of the city council ask the Office of General Counsel for an opinion on it, I would say. But there's a possibility that 3.01E2 of the charter would insist that you have a referendum in order to approve a change that would actually dissolve the Board of Trustees. Because of the timing that's involved, and your chairman, having once served as supervisor of elections, would certainly know this, you want to have this referendum concurrent with a general election, and you would need to be making recommendations and having action taken place quickly, even if you're going to have this come up next November or in the following municipal elections. And I urge you, I had much more than I think everybody else has said, and frankly, better than I could possibly say it, but I urge you to consider this and take all of the steps that are necessary in order to get the city council on board, attempt to get the Duval delegation on board. It's going to be difficult to do that, obviously, because it's going to require that you start working on it almost immediately, if that's even a possibility. But again, I do think that as part of comprehensive reform, the Board of Trustees of the PFPF has to be dissolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. There was someone sitting over here, the man rubbing your, yeah, I didn't get your name. Did you want to? Davis. Davis, would you like to speak? I can't read my handwriting.
Mr. Shy and members of the task force, thank you for this opportunity. Actually, everything that...
Would you say your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Derwin Davis, 8458 Stocks Road, Jacksonville, 32220. And everything that I had come prepared to say has actually already been said. So briefly, I would just like to ask everybody on this task force to realize that you're here representing maybe people and firms that are in business or related to the government, the fund, and everything like that, but you personally don't have anything invested. I'm asking you to represent these members over here and look out for their interest. And I can say that I believe this, I'm a union member, retired, and I get a pension through a board of trustees. And so I'm kind of familiar with what they're going through right now. You really need to address this problem of the board of trustees. It needs to be addressed immediately. It needs to be taken care of. And the second thing is to get that unfunded liability in check. One gentleman preceding me has already stated that you might have to look at a 10% tax increase. That it's, according to him, it's not a possibility, it's coming if nothing's done. I think that was conservative. I think it's going to take much more than that if it's not addressed and compensated for now. And I thank you, and y'all have a great evening.
Thank you so much. That's all the people that raised their hands, I believe. I have Mr. Gulliford and Mr. Reineman left. Before they come, Ted, you wanted to ask a question at one point?
I think the person's hard of that. Why is Mr. Gulliford and Mr. Ryman left to the end?
They asked to be at the end. Yep. Anybody else want to speak? Mr. Gulliford.
Thank you, Mr. Shy and committee members, and actually I asked to be at the end because I figured I could cut my time by not being repetitive after hearing so many comments, and I think that's appropriate because all of us are tired and probably want to go home and eat dinner. I sure am glad y'all are willing to help because, as you can tell, it's a very complex issue. I think that we've heard a lot of historic fixation, and while that might be meaningful, it really is not, it's not productive, I don't believe. An older man many years ago told me, always play the hand you're dealt. And I think we need to stay focused on the hand we're dealt, and it is a difficult hand, and I recognize that. You've heard intriguing commentaries. I'll just share a couple of quick observations and leave it at that. I was going to address the point that the sheriff raised, and I think it's very poignant. I think that we do need to have to look at it as look at the total unfunded liability for the benefit of the community. You are looking at roughly $2.4 billion, and I think it would be irresponsible for us not to address that issue as part of the entire process because it's got to have resolution. If we're forced to accelerate, you've heard the commentary about the potential for accelerating contributions from whatever source that would be, and the suggestion would be that maybe increased millage rate. In fact, one of my colleagues was thinking out loud several months ago and saying, I wonder if we could establish an increase in or a set millage rate that would be dedicated, as Mr. Lee has suggested, that might be the case, dedicated to apply to the unfunded liability. I would suggest, if that comes as a possibility or a suggestion, that you might instead consider another alternative. The mayor alluded to it, and that is the JEA contribution that's made each year, because it seems to me you would have a fixed amount, and that fixed amount would be better codified as a fixed amount coming from JEA each year rather than to establish a millage rate that could be played with, plus the fact you've got an issue of fluctuating property values and the like, so consequently that millage rate would probably end up fluctuating, and certainly an easier way to address it would be, and I'm not suggesting that that's what we have to do or need to do, but if that becomes one of the alternatives, I would suggest to you that an allocation may be a better suggestion. And even to the extent that could, and I've talked to the Pew folks about this, could you, and I understand that we don't want to go with pension obligation bonds, but could we allocate a certain portion of that revenue towards some kind of debt that would not be construed or interpreted as pension obligation bonds? Because obviously the fact that we can't issue a bond like that without advancing or passing on the savings as a municipal bond does is certainly detrimental to the concept of borrowing, and we've already heard that. It doesn't sound like pension obligation bonds are a very good alternative. I want to remind everybody the limitation that was raised on us. We have one revenue source that we have any real control over, and that's setting the millage rate, ad valorem tax millage rate. And right now we're approaching 40% of the ad valorem tax millage rate going to fund the pension obligations. We can't do much more before you saw what the results of it was this year with respect to having to increase millage rate just to hit fundamental services and basic services. And I would submit to you, if you really looked at our budget, we didn't really maintain what the level of service was the prior year, even with the increase. So it's an issue for us. The insurance proposal, I will assure you that I know that Pew is going to review it. I will make sure the council auditor reviews it also, because I'm intrigued by it. I probably would hit my knees tonight and say a special prayer that something like that could work, because it certainly sounds almost too good to be true. My experience prior to this as a mayor of Atlantic Beach is we functioned under Chapter 175 and 185, and of course we had a pension board, and that pension board was selected the same way as every other pension board in the state is selected. In our case, we're unique because the pension board has gone way beyond what the normal responsibilities of that board is, which is typically just review. So I have suggested in the past, by way of a resolution and a J bill that did not get out of committee last year, that we have the right to appoint that 5th member. I have resubmitted that resolution. It's not because I don't like the firemen, the police officers, or whatever, but I just think if we have the financial responsibility, we should have more control over how that is administered, how it's overseen, and how they function. Lastly, or I guess next to last, opening up the investment options, as Mr. Keene has suggested, may help, but it won't save us. Just as selling city property or city assets because of the magnitude of the problem we face is maybe a help, but it ain't going to save us either. The earlier comment that I heard from someone is that, and this was what prompted my actions as council president, is, folks, we need to fix it right. One time, we get one chance to fix it right. We've got to be right on when we do it. The reality is, when you looked at the projection of how much it would cost us, how much contribution we'd have to make over the next 10, 15, 20 years, it was unrealistic. We couldn't do it. We just couldn't do it. Again, I want to thank you very much for your service. I can tell you the council stands ready. We recognize this is a huge problem. We know it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed to the benefit of the people out there. There's uncertainty, and I understand that too, with members of the union and people that are under the pension plan. So anything I can do, I'm available, and certainly, again, applaud you all for making the contribution of time and energy to this. Thank you, Mr. Shy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Committee
Gold,
members.
for all your service, too. Thank you. Yes, Ted. Yep.
It's late at night. I forgot who Mr. Bellifer was. I just made that objection. I certainly don't object to the president of the city council being last. I do have some concerns about Mr. Reineman, though, because when we received his letter, it seemed to be a lot of personal attacks, a lot of just sort of uninformed, bias and prejudice. I just didn't see. I mean, if we're trying to say that he needs to be the cream on top of the pie or something, I've got a little problem with that based on what I thought was, not a very well researched letter that was filled with a lot of, personal accusation.
Well, I appreciate that. I tried to organize the schedule in ways that people requested. I thought about it, and I did it this way, so that would be my fault.
I just thought that the purpose of this committee was to take the personal out of it, and if we're excusing Mr. Reineman, he's been the most personal of this whole process.
Well, we have Mr. Reineman's letter. I've asked him not to repeat the letter, but he does have a few comments that he wants to say. He's heard the ground rules about personal invective. And so, Jim, if you'll come to the podium, you have 5 minutes. And don't rehash what is in the letter, and just give your observations at this point. Thank you.
I'm Jim Reineman, 14566 Longview Drive South, 32223. I'm sorry if you feel that I have been full of invective, but I'm very close to this problem, and I've confronted it quite often for the last 3 or 4 years. I was the chairman of the JCCI finance study on the pensions, and we spent many, many hours with Mr. Keene and others discussing these matters. And I would say to you that your group is probably, if you succeed in solving this problem, you will be at least the second most important commission that we've ever had in Jacksonville, perhaps even more important than the Commission on Local Government Study that created consolidated government, because this is a very critical thing, and it is difficult to keep from getting involved in accusations, and I'll try not to do that tonight. I think of this problem as a Gordian knot. You will recall that in the 3 or 4 centuries before Christ, there was a fellow in King Midas in Turkey who created a complex knot about the size of his head and challenged everyone to come and try to untie it. And that's similar to what's happened here over the last 40 years of building the threads of the 30-year agreement, the legislation in the state, the ordinances in the council, and all the things that have been done to try to make sure that this pension plan works the way the pension board wants it to work. And I'm addressing primarily the police and fire because the problem there is so much greater, and I think that if we come up with solutions for them, they will apply adequately to the general employees and the corrections officers. John Keene told the JCI Commission that they were wasting their time talking about pension reform because he had built a Gordian knot of all of these laws and 30-year agreement, and that there's nothing that could be done about it. I think he's changed his mind now as things have evolved over the past 3 years. But this is the problem that we've got to create. Are we hogtied by those laws or not? That Gordian knot that was created probably could be tugged a little bit here and a little bit there. You could go and litigate the 30-year agreement. You could go and litigate the right of the pension board to negotiate and collectively bargain for pension benefits. But those would not be a useful thing to do at this time because it would take so much time and it would take so much money that ought to be spent taking care of the unfunded liability, that what we need to do is do as Alexander the Great did, slice the Gordian knot in half with this sword. And the way to do that is to convince the unions and the employees, and possibly even John Keene, that the situation has become out of hand and we are going to go bankrupt and we are not going to be able to pay pensions, or at least pay much lower pensions, much as they're doing in various cities in California and in Detroit today. And that is the kind of thing that we need to be addressing. I didn't intend to hand this out, but since we've got a restriction on time, I will. But I'd like to point out a couple of other things. The problem is much greater than we think. The actuaries who have done these studies and created the unfunded liability for us have been told what to assume by the pension board. And those assumptions are artificial, and they aren't real. And if they were real assumptions of what the return and the mortality tables and the salary schedules and so forth, if they were real, our unfunded liability is much greater than 1.7 billion. It is probably closer to 3 billion. I don't think it's worthwhile to try to find that out because I think you're going to conclude that
30 seconds, Mr. Rowland.
The best we can hope for is 80% of funding, and if we just figure out a way to do that with shared sacrifice, and that involves convincing the unions and the employees that they must share in the effort to reduce these fundings. I'm sorry that I can't finish these recommendations, but I will leave you a copy that you can read.
That'd be great. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
I think that's everybody that I had on my list.
I did have one other point. Yep. Mr. Gulliford brought it up, and I think it's very important. Please do a complete job. Don't do a halfway job. Don't leave something to be decided later. Let's have a complete package that does the job, and then let's try to get it accomplished, and not do as everybody's always done in the past, a little bit here, a little bit there, and not solve the problem.
Thank you. We are going to do our best to do that.
I
Any-
do regret that I couldn't ask the guy while he was, referring to people who have put their lives on the line for 30 years as getting welfare from the city of Jacksonville. I thought that was pretty offensive. And that was the reason I wanted to ask
Yep.
about this comment.
That question probably didn't need to ask, because probably everybody felt the same way, probably. So,
I think
yeah,
so.
yeah, but thank you for reminding us of that. Next steps, what I've asked, I want to make sure y'all are in agreement with this. I've asked Pew, since we now really have to get our voices and hearts and minds in it, we've sort of finished the information gathering, so between now and our next meeting, which I think is December the 5th or 7th, something, 5th, I think, they're going to start laying out a potpourri of things for us to be considering based on what they've heard. Not final recommendations, not anything like that, but putting before us in some way that we can grasp. And then we'll spend our next meeting talking about those, because we have to get ourselves out in this debate or discussion. So I hope that that's what y'all intend. I don't really think we need to get more. We're inundated with the facts. We know it's very complex. We've got, as the mayor said, a foundation, Civic Council Foundation. We've heard proposals. So I think now's the time for us to start getting our hands and hearts dirty. Do y'all agree with that? So I think the next meeting we've scheduled for the morning of the 5th. Any thoughts, suggestions, anything else we need to do tonight? Are you all comfortable with that process? Okay. Great.
They're going to start bringing us some things next time.
Yes, they are. They are. That's what I've asked them to do. They would, if y'all would like to call them, you can't talk with each other, but you can talk with them. And I think you have their contact information. It's on that sheet that Carol sent out. They would love to hear from each of you. They're here to help us. And so.
Bill,
Well-
will we be getting their recommendations prior to the meeting so that we have an opportunity to read them and study them, so that when we are together, we can
That's a great
discuss
point.
it?
Yes, we will. Yeah. Yeah. We'd like it this Tuesday, Jonathan, so that we can have a month to consider it. So thank you very much. I think that's all of our business tonight. This has been a long night, but I hope that the community has felt that they've had some input, and we will continue on. Thank you.